The mailman delivered letters to a house that didn't exist. For 11 years, Harold Mercer delivered a letter to 116 Willow Lane every Thursday morning. Always the same house, always the same mailbox, always addressed to the same woman. Mrs. Abigail Vale, 116 Willow Lane. Harold never met her. He never saw anyone enter or leave the house. But every Thursday, when he returned the following morning, the envelope was gone. He never questioned it, not until the day another mailman told him something impossible. There was no 116 Willow Lane, and according to town records, there never had been. The Thursday route, Harold Mercer had been a mail carrier for 34 years. He knew every cracked sidewalk, barking dog, loose porch step, and temperamental mailbox on his route. He knew Mrs. Jenkins at number 82 ordered gardening catalogs every spring. He knew Mr. Turner at 91 received birthday cards from a daughter in Arizona every September. And he knew that every Thursday morning, one handwritten envelope appeared in his sorting bin addressed to Abigail Vale. There was never a return address. The envelopes were cream-colored, the handwriting was elegant, and the stamps were strange, old-fashioned. Harold assumed somebody simply liked vintage stamps. Willow Lane was one of the oldest roads in town. Number 116 stood at the very end. It was an old Victorian house behind a rusted iron fence. The place always made Harold uncomfortable. The curtains were permanently closed, paint peeled from the siding. A dead oak tree leaned over the roof. Even during summer, the property seemed trapped beneath a gray shadow. The mailbox stood beside the road, 116. Harold would stop, open the box, place the letter inside, close it, and leave. Every Friday, the mailbox was empty. For 11 years, until Harold retired. The retirement party. His co-workers threw him a small party at the post office. Cake, coffee, a cheap gold watch. His replacement was a young carrier named Lucas Reed. Harold spent 3 days teaching him the route. Watch the shepherd at 73, Harold warned. Looks friendly until you touch the gate. Lucas laughed. Got it. And Thursdays, you'll get a letter for Abigail Vale. Who? 116 Willow. Lucas frowned. Okay. Harold didn't notice the expression. Not then. 3 weeks after retirement, Harold was mowing his lawn when Lucas pulled into his driveway. The young man climbed out. You got a minute? Sure. Lucas held an envelope. Harold recognized it instantly. Cream paper, elegant handwriting. Mrs. Abigail Vale, 116 Willow Lane. You forgot to deliver it? Lucas didn't answer. Harold pointed. End of Willow, Victorian house. Lucas stared at him. What Victorian house? Harold laughed. Very funny. I'm serious. Number 116. Harold. Lucas placed the envelope on the hood of his car. Willow Lane ends at 114. Harold stopped smiling. No, it doesn't. I drove it 3 times. You're missing the turn. There isn't a turn. There's an iron fence. No. Dead oak tree. No. Big gray Victorian. Lucas shook his head. There's an empty field after 114. Harold stared at him. That's impossible. Lucas pulled out his phone. I checked the county property database. He showed Harold the screen. Willow Lane, numbers 78 through 114, nothing beyond. Harold took the phone. Search Abigail Vale. I did. And? Lucas hesitated. There isn't one. The empty field. Harold drove there himself. He turned onto Willow Lane shortly before sunset. Everything was exactly as he remembered. Then, nothing. Harold stopped his car. Beyond number 114 was an overgrown field. No iron fence, no mailbox, no dead oak, no Victorian house. He stepped from the car. This isn't possible. He walked into the weeds. Perhaps the house had been demolished. But 3 weeks? There would be debris, foundation stones, tire tracks, something. There was nothing. Then Harold saw an elderly woman watching him from number 114. "Excuse me," he approached cautiously. "I'm Harold Mercer. I used to deliver your mail." "I remember." "What happened to the house next door?" Her expression changed. "What house?" 116. The woman's face went pale. "There hasn't been a house there since I've lived here." "How long is that?" 42 years. Harold laughed nervously. "I delivered mail there last month." The woman stared at him, then whispered, "You saw it?" Something about the way she said it frightened him. "What do you mean?" She stepped closer. "My husband saw it once." Harold stopped breathing. "When?" 1987. She looked toward the field. "He came home one night and told me there was a house standing there." Her voice lowered. "Next morning it was gone." Abigail Vale. Harold spent the next day at the county library. He searched newspapers, property records, old maps. Eventually, he found Willow Lane on a map from 1954. His finger moved along the road. Then, Harold stared. Edward and Abigail Vale. His skin prickled. The house had existed. He searched newspaper archives. 3 hours later, he found the headline: "Family vanishes from Willow Lane home, October 17, 1956. Edward Vale, his wife, Abigail, their children, Samuel, 8, and Margaret, 6, all disappeared. There were no signs of forced entry. Dinner remained on the table. Edward's wallet was upstairs. Abigail's purse sat beside the front door. The children's beds had been slept in. The family was simply gone. Then Harold found another article. 2 months later, the house burned down. No cause was ever determined. The property was never rebuilt. Harold sat motionless. He had delivered letters to that house for 11 years, a house destroyed decades before he became a mailman. Then he remembered something. The envelopes. Who had been sending them? The first letter. Harold asked Lucas to save the next one. Thursday arrived. At 7:13 a.m., Lucas called. "It's here." Harold drove to the post office. The envelope sat on the sorting table. Same handwriting, same cream paper. But this time, Harold examined the stamp carefully. His stomach turned. The stamp wasn't vintage. It was original. The postmark read, October 16, 1956. Lucas whispered, "That's impossible." Harold turned the envelope over. No return address. "We should open it." "That's a federal crime." Harold looked at him. "The recipient disappeared 70 years ago." They stood silently. Then Lucas noticed something. "Harold." "What?" "Your name." On the back of the envelope, written faintly in pencil, Harold Mercer. Harold's mouth went dry. He opened it. Inside was one sheet of paper. The handwriting was different, childlike. 3 words: "Please stop coming." Lucas stepped backward. "What the hell?" Harold turned the page over. More writing. "It knows you now." The lights in the sorting room flickered. Then every light went out. Somewhere behind them, A metal mail cart rolled across the floor by itself. Thursday night. Harold couldn't sleep. At 2:11 a.m., he heard something outside, a metallic squeak. He sat up. Again. Squeak. Harold walked downstairs. His porch light illuminated the yard. Nothing. Then he saw it. At the edge of his property stood a mailbox. Harold didn't own a roadside mailbox. His mail slot was built into his front door. But there it was, black, rusty, standing beneath the streetlight. Numbers painted on the side. 116. Harold's heart hammered. He locked the door. The mailbox opened. By itself. Then slammed shut. Harold backed away from the window. His telephone rang. He nearly screamed. Lucas. Harold? What? I found something. Not tonight. You need to hear this. Lucas had searched old postal records. Letters to Abigail Vale had continued arriving after the family vanished. Different carriers reported them. Most were returned as undeliverable, but 3 mail carriers had claimed they'd successfully delivered them. Harold gripped the phone. What happened to those carriers? Lucas went silent. Lucas? The first disappeared in 1961. Harold stared toward the mailbox. The second? Missing in 1988. And the third? Lucas whispered. 2004. Harold closed his eyes. When did I start delivering those letters? Lucas answered. 2005. Outside, the mailbox opened again. The house returns Thursday morning arrived beneath a violent thunderstorm. Harold knew he shouldn't go. Every instinct screamed at him to stay home. Instead, he drove to Willow Lane. Because Harold needed to know what happened to Abigail Vale, and why the house had chosen him. Rain hammered the windshield. He passed 112, then slammed on the brakes. The house was back. 116 Willow Lane, standing exactly as Harold remembered. Gray Victorian siding, dead oak, iron fence, mailbox. But something was different. The front door stood open. Harold stepped from the car. Abigail? Lightning flashed. For an instant, silhouettes appeared behind every upstairs window. A man, a woman, 2 children, and others, many others. Harold approached the porch. Inside, the air smelled like burned wood. The entrance hall was covered in soot. Family photographs lined the walls. Harold examined one. The Vale family. Another, a postal worker. Harold recognized the uniform from the 1960s. Another photograph, different mailman, 1980s. Another, the missing carriers. Then Harold reached the final photograph. His own face stared back. Harold stepped back. A child's voice whispered behind him. You shouldn't have kept bringing them. Harold turned. A little girl stood on the staircase, 6 years old, old-fashioned dress. Burn marks covered one side of her face. Margaret? The girl nodded. Where's your mother? Margaret pointed upstairs. She isn't my mother anymore. A door slammed above them. Harold jumped. What happened here? Margaret whispered. The letters. What was inside them? Abigail Vale had belonged to a small spiritualist circle. After losing her infant daughter years earlier, she'd become obsessed with communicating with the dead. She received instructions through automatic writing. Eventually, letters began arriving. No return addresses. Each contained instructions. At first, harmless. Light candles. Leave doors open. Speak certain names. Then the instructions changed. On October 16, 1956, Abigail received the final letter. It promised she could bring her dead daughter home. She followed its instructions. At midnight, something came through. But it wasn't her daughter. "It couldn't stay without permission," Margaret whispered, "so it used Mother." Harold stared upstairs. "What does it want with the mailman?" Margaret's burned face twisted with sadness. "Someone has to bring the invitation." Harold understood. The letters weren't messages. They were invitations. Each delivered envelope strengthened whatever lived inside 116 Willow Lane. And when a carrier delivers enough? Margaret looked directly at him. The house comes for him. A floorboard creaked upstairs. Margaret's eyes widened. "It's awake." Abigail something descended the stairs, bare feet, one step at a time. Harold couldn't move. A woman appeared, or what remained of one. She wore a burned nightgown. Her skin was gray. Her mouth hung unnaturally wide. But her eyes were the worst, completely black. "Harold." The voice came from everywhere. "You brought my letters." Harold backed toward the door. "For 11 years. The thing smiled. "Such dedication." The front door slammed shut. Harold ran. He crashed through the dining room. The table was still set. 4 plates, food blackened with age. Behind him came slow footsteps. No hurry. It knew he couldn't escape. Harold entered the kitchen. A pile of envelopes covered the floor. Thousands. He noticed the handwriting. Every envelope was addressed to Abigail. But beneath the pile was something else. A leather mail bag. Harold pulled it free. Inside were unopened letters. The missing carriers hadn't delivered all of them. They had tried to stop the cycle. Harold suddenly understood. The entity needed the letters delivered, not merely brought near the house, delivered. Harold grabbed every envelope he could find. Then he opened the cast-iron stove. A faint flame burned inside. He threw the letters in. Upstairs, something screamed. The house shook. Harold dumped the mailbag into the fire. "No!" Abigail appeared in the doorway. Harold threw the final envelope into the flames. The walls erupted. Fire raced across the ceiling. Margaret appeared beside him. "Run!" This time the front door opened. Harold ran through smoke and flames. He reached the road. Behind him, 116 Willow Lane burned. Again. He watched until the Victorian house collapsed. Then lightning flashed. The fire disappeared. The house disappeared. Harold stood alone before an empty field. The letters stopped. One Thursday passed, then another, then another. Lucas received nothing for Abigail Vale. Harold began sleeping again. The mailbox marked 116 disappeared from his yard. Months passed. Harold convinced himself it was over. Then, on Christmas Eve, someone knocked on his door. Lucas stood outside. He looked terrified. "What?" Lucas held an envelope, cream-colored. Harold's heart sank. "No. It's not addressed to Abigail." Lucas handed it over. Harold looked down. "Mr. Harold Mercer, 116 Willow Lane." His hands began shaking. "That's not my address." "I know." Harold turned the envelope over. There was a return address. For the first time. He almost didn't look. Then he did. Margaret Vale, 116 Willow Lane, October 17th, 1956. Harold opened the envelope. One sheet of paper, childlike handwriting. "You didn't destroy it." Harold stopped breathing. Beneath that, "You only made it move." The lights inside Harold's house went out. Lucas stared past him. "Harold." Harold slowly turned. His hallway looked different. Longer, much longer. Wallpaper covered walls that had been painted 5 minutes earlier. An antique chandelier hung overhead. At the far end stood a staircase. Harold recognized it. No. A little girl stood at the top. Margaret. She wasn't burned anymore. She looked terrified. Harold! What? Margaret pointed behind him. Don't let her inside! Harold spun around. Lucas was gone. The porch was gone. The street was gone. Beyond the doorway stood Willow Lane. But not Willow Lane in the present. Old automobiles lined the street. A newspaper blew across the pavement. Harold caught a glimpse of the date, October 17th, 1956. Then he heard breathing behind him. A woman's voice whispered into his ear. You've delivered my mail for 11 years. Harold closed his eyes. Cold fingers touched his shoulder. Now. The front door slammed shut. You can stay and receive it. Lucas Reed told police Harold Mercer disappeared on Christmas Eve. His car remained in the driveway. His wallet was on the kitchen counter. Nothing appeared stolen. There were no signs of forced entry. Authorities searched for months. They found nothing. Eventually, Harold became another missing person case, and Lucas continued delivering mail. Years passed. Then, one rainy Thursday morning, Lucas was sorting his route when he discovered an unfamiliar envelope. Cream-colored, elegant handwriting, no return address. His hands began trembling before he even read it. Mr. Harold Mercer, 116 Willow Lane. Lucas refused to deliver it. He marked the envelope. Address does not exist. Returned to sender. Then dropped it into the outgoing bin. The next morning, it was back. Lucas threw it away. It returned. He burned it. Thursday morning, another appeared. Then another. Then another. For 6 consecutive weeks. Until one foggy morning, Lucas reached the end of Willow Lane. He passed number 114 and slammed on the brakes. Where the empty field should have been, stood a gray Victorian house. Dead oak tree, iron fence, black mailbox. 116. Lucas stared at the upstairs window. Someone stood behind the curtain. An old man, wearing a postal uniform. Harold. Lucas stepped from his truck. Harold frantically shook his head. Don't. Lucas looked down at the envelope in his hand. Then the mailbox door slowly opened. Waiting. From somewhere inside the house, a woman began laughing, and Harold started pounding desperately against the glass. Because after all those years, the mail had finally found another carrier. If you liked this story, hit the like button and please subscribe to our channel. Thank you.